has declared himself the winner of the 12th October election, saying he defeated 92-year-old President Paul Biya, who is seeking to extend his 43-year rule by 7 more years. Chiroma's declaration was criticized by both the government and Biya's ruling party, with several officials describing it as illegal. Cameroon's Constitutional Council has not yet released the final result. It has until the 27th of October to declare the winner. Chiroma's defiance and promise to defend what the 76-year-old calls his victory has raised fears of violence in the Central African nation. Away from that, as tension continues to mount in Ivory Coast ahead of Saturday's presidential election, gendarme has been shot and killed while on patrol in the south of the country. His assailants have not been identified, but the region is a traditional opposition stronghold and has been the site of recent protests after the two leading opposition candidates, Lawrence Gbagbo and Tidjane Thiam, were barred from standing in the upcoming election. All protests have now been outlawed by the government of President Al-Hassan Ouattara as he runs for a fourth term. The 83-year-old now faces 4 remaining opposition candidates: Simon Gbagbo, Howard Don Mello, Jean-Louis Billon, and Henriette Legault. Their rallies have not been affected by the ban on protest. Since taking office in 2011, Ouattara has invested in major infrastructure projects across the country, but inequality and the cost of living have soared. Ouattara's opponents also accuse him of being too close to the country's former colonial rulers, France. Elsewhere, former Kenyan Prime Minister and revered long-time opposition leader Raila Odinga was buried in the west of the country after a service attended by thousands on Sunday. The burial concluded days of memorials that had time led to chaos, with at least 5 mourners dying at other events and dozens injured at a public viewing on Saturday. Recall that Odinga died on Wednesday at the age of 80 in an Indian hospital. He became prime minister after the bloody and disputed 2007 election and was the main opposition leader for many years, losing 5 presidential campaigns, most recently 3 years ago. He retains a devotional following in the west of the country. Former U.S. President Barack Obama, whose Kenyan family hails from the same region, called Odinga a true champion of democracy. Politicians, relatives, and throngs of his supporters waved Kenyan flags and held his picture aloft as they gathered at Sunday's memorial service, which was held at a university in Bondo. In a separate development, shares in France's biggest bank, BNP Paribas, dropped as much as 10% on Monday after a United States court verdict last week found it helped Sudan's government commit genocide. A New York federal jury on Friday ordered the bank to pay close to $21 million to 3 plaintiffs who fled Sudan and are now U.S. citizens. They testified about human rights abuses perpetrated by the regime of former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. BNP Paribas gave Sudanese authorities access to international money markets in the 1990s and 2000s. Plaintiffs said these contracts helped the Sudanese government commit atrocities against its population. In a statement on Monday, the bank said it would appeal the verdict and argued the decision should not lead to more compensation demands. But analysts said uncertainty over potential further claims or penalties weighed on BNP Paribas shares on Monday and would likely continue to do so. Lawyers for the 3 plaintiffs said the verdict opens the door for more than 20,000 Sudanese refugees in the U.S. to seek billions of dollars in damages from the French bank. According to reports, during his 3 decades in power, Omar al-Bashir led a deeply authoritarian rule. His country was marred by several internal wars, including the war in Darfur. between 2003 and 2005. The Sudanese government's attack on Darfur killed around 200,000 civilians and displaced 2 million people, according to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Meanwhile, a drone attack struck the vicinity of Khartoum International Airport early Tuesday, casting doubt on authorities' plans to reopen the facility for domestic flights the following day after a 30-month closure due to Sudan's brutal civil war. Eyewitnesses reported hearing drones over central and southern Khartoum, followed by multiple explosions between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. local time. The attack came just one day after Sudanese Civil Aviation Authority announced the airport would resume domestic flights on Wednesday, October 22nd, following the completion of necessary technical and operational arrangements. The planned reopening marked a significant milestone in the conflict between the Sudanese Army and Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, representing the first potential resumption of operations at the capital's main airport since April 2023. Recall that the army had claimed in March that it eliminated the last RSF strongholds in Khartoum and regained control of the airport and surrounding facilities. The Democratic Republic of Congo begins countdown to end of Ebola outbreak as last patient recovers. Stay tuned for details of these and more in a moment. Welcome back and thanks for staying tuned. We'll bring you the rest of the stories on Spotlight Africa, and we head now to Egypt, where there has been calls for the reopening of the Rafah border crossing as humanitarian aid remains scarce in Gaza. The call comes as the Israeli army confirmed it carried out airstrikes today in the Palestinian town of the border with Egypt. As part of the first phase of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, Israel was scheduled to reopen the Rafah crossing on Wednesday. Many Egyptians in Cairo expressed solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza, saying reopening the crucial aid crossing could save many lives. Elsewhere, Namibia's Ministry of Health is on high alert after the country's first Mpox case was confirmed in Swakopmund on Saturday. The patient who tested positive on the 18th of October is in a stable condition and remains in isolation at the Swakopmund District Hospital. Authorities have officially declared an outbreak in line with WHO protocols, which treats a single confirmed case as an outbreak. Preliminary investigations link the case to cross-border travel within the Southern African region. Health officials in Erongo are now tracing contacts and monitoring for additional cases. The ministry has assured the public that Namibia is fully prepared with isolation facilities ready to manage suspected infectious diseases. Mpox, a viral disease similar to smallpox, spreads through direct skin contact, respiratory droplets, or contaminated materials. Symptoms include fever, swollen lymph nodes, and a blistering rash. 17 African countries, including Zambia, Malawi, Tanzania, and the DRC, are currently reporting active outbreaks. This year alone, Africa has recorded more than 118,000 cases, surpassing last year's total. Still looking at the Democratic Republic of Congo, there has been fight against Ebola, which has achieved a major milestone. The last patient being treated since an outbreak of the disease has been released from hospital. The hour recovery starts the clock on a 42-day countdown to declaring the outbreak over if no further cases are confirmed. Meanwhile, almost 40 members of the M23 rebel group have surrendered in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. The fighters who turned over their arms were reportedly civilians, soldiers and police officers who had been kidnapped and forcibly conscripted when the cities of Goma and Bukavu were captured by M23 earlier this year. The fighters surrendered in North Kivu Province, Kalehi and South Kivu, and included 2 officers. An army commander called on other rebels to follow suit. Recall that last week, the DRC and the M23 agreed to set up an oversight body for a potential permanent ceasefire in the decades-long conflict. The agreement was signed in Doha after mediation by Qatar. That builds on a declaration of principles signed in July that would restore state authorities in Eastern Congo. To bring Spotlight Africa to a close, we bring the spotlight to Nigeria, where Nnamdi Kanu's long-running legal battle has reignited tension in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The separatist leader on trial for terrorism charges linked to the outlawed Indigenous People of Biafra, or IPOB, is set to begin his defense on Thursday after a court dismissed his no-case submission. Kanu, who has been in detention since 2021 and holds British citizenship, denies the charges. IPOB, which was banned in 2017, is pushing for an independent Biafran state in Nigeria's southeast. As supporters gathered outside to demand his release, led by activist Omoyole Sowore, police fired tear gas and blocked major roads, triggering traffic chaos. Eyewitnesses say several people, including members of Kanu's legal team and family, were arrested, though police have not commented. Kanu remains a deeply polarizing figure, rivaled by authorities but revered by many in the southeast. His case, which has already seen years of legal twist, continues to fuel political and ethnic tension in Nigeria. And that's all we are able to bring to you at this time on Spotlight Africa, bringing you stories all around the continent. This has been put together by Spectrum Television. Do well to follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. I am Uyai MM. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good afternoon.